allow me to introduce Battery Mineral Resources. We are a battery minerals focused mining company in the development sector. I'm Martin Kostwick, CEO and a director of the company, and I'd like to share with you why I, as an executive of the company and also an investor, why you should consider investing in BMR. So we're a very investor-focused company. We have a variety of assets within our portfolio, and it's our objective to provide our shareholders with exposure to the mega trend of electrification that's going on around the world. And I think when I say that, 99% of people understand what that really means. It's all around us, the trend towards electrification. I think that electrification, this trend is one of the fastest growing segments of the world economy, and it's very real and it's very understandable for a lot of people. So we plan on giving our investors accretive exposure to this marketplace via our projects that we have within our company and the commodities that those projects represent, which is namely cobalt, lithium, graphite, and copper. As I said, we are very shareholder focused, and it's important for me to spend just a minute talking about our shareholder base. We are a brand new company trading on the TSXV and also the OTCQB marketplaces. And we've been a public company for a little over a year now. In that year since we became public, we have raised a little over 27 million in Canadian dollars. That goes towards our projects in terms of developing them. The very first investment we made was to the tune, we raised about $12 million US dollars towards the purchase of a former producing copper mine in Chile. And I'll talk more about that project, but that was a very important investment for us, and you'll understand more about that as we go along. One thing to note, though, is if you look at the pie chart and our investment makeup, we very much are, I would say, structured as a private company, and it's not the worst thing in the world. We are a fairly new company to the marketplace. But it's important to note that our largest shareholder, which is a private equity fund based in New York, is very understanding that that pie chart needs to change, and they're very supportive of us diversifying that shareholder base. And we're well along the way of doing that. In fact, the 12 million US that we raised to purchase the former producing mine, I was able to bring in all new investors and somewhat dilute down Yorktown's position. They were more than happy with that. They're also a very good investor because they share the very vision that we have in terms of how we're going to develop the company, how we're going to provide shareholder value, which is essentially, as I said, providing exposure to this global marketplace tied in with the electrification of things, but also our vision to transform the company from where we are now as a development style company into a cash flowing entity. So very, very good, supportive. They are the elephant in the room, but they're a mighty good elephant to have, and it's important for you to understand that. So I mentioned that we raised some capital. We closed that deal last May, Best Efforts private placement to acquire the assets of a former producing copper mine in Chile. And really our investment thesis and how we are going to provide value to the shareholders is via the catalysts that we have in front of us. And job one for us is to resume operations at this former producing copper mine. Once we we have an eye on doing that this year. So not only are we developing other projects that we have in our portfolio, which I'll talk about, we have an eye towards becoming a sustainable and responsible supplier to the battery mineral marketplace. Job one is getting Punitaqui back into production and leveraging the cash that Punitaqui is going to generate to then turn around and look at our other assets, which we have, which I said are involved with various commodities, including cobalt, lithium, graphite, and of course copper. Those projects then become our pipeline of projects once we have the means to fund them without going back to the shareholders, and that's exactly our plan, is to become a self-sustaining cash flowing company and develop the existing assets we have in the company. One of the things that I'm probably even more excited about are some of the assets that we don't have. And what I mean by that is ever since the border opened up in Chile, and expatriates have been allowed to travel to the country. I've been there a few times, and every time I come away with a better and more exciting view of the opportunities we have to scale our company within Chile itself. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along, but that's probably the biggest thing that can add value to our shareholders, is the ability for us to potentially repeat what we're going to do there in the coming months. Our asset base is very diverse geographically, also by commodities. So again, we look at cobalt, lithium, graphite, and copper. They also vary in terms of how far along the development scale they are, from a very early stage lithium brine project in Nevada to our near-term producing project, which is the copper mine in Chile. It is called the Punitaqui mine. It has a 9-year operating history. About 8 of those years, it was owned and operated by Glencore. And essentially, if you think about the fact that it produced as recently as April of 2020, you might think that it has a lot of assets incorporated into the project, and it does. If you think about an operating mine today, an operating underground mine, take away the equipment, and that's exactly what we have at this operation. So the capital has been deployed, and we look to a relatively simple restart in terms of cost and timeline. So the 9-year operating history, it produced about 25 million pounds of copper annually, and that's exactly what we tend to repeat as we go forward. We're not changing that plan. So we look at it as being a great investment for the company, really for a couple of reasons. One was the low entry point, like I said, about 12 million US. The next job is to capitalize it into production, which we plan on doing this year. The CapEx, the restart cost is about 25 million, including working capital, and we're refining that number right now. But because of the brownfield nature, that's why we're looking at a pretty modest CapEx and a relatively quick timeline to production. So we have once we have the means to invest in this and get going, we work backwards from our goal of putting ore through the mill by the end of the year. We're going to get started on some pretty serious mining activity in the next month. So that'll give us time to expose ore faces and get things ready for feeding the mill towards the end of the year. But if you look at the history of the mine and what we plan on doing, which is about 25 million pounds, today's prices, we're looking at a little over a $2 margin. So for a relatively modest investment, which you could look at it from the initial purchase price plus the development cost plus the initial capital, it's about $50 million, which is exactly what the mine should be producing on an annual basis once we get going. So not a bad little investment, and really puts ourselves in a good position for a nice re-rating of the company going forward. We're on a pretty aggressive but doable timeline. As I said earlier, to get into production this year, we're coming out with a brand new resource statement, which our goal is to have about 5 million tons of resources in front of us as a starting point for this underground mine. Then we'll continue to develop and drill as we go using our own cash. Then we start looking at our other projects. We have cobalt projects in Northern Ontario and Northern Idaho. Northern Ontario is a very prolific mining region in terms of cobalt production. We've been drilling there for about 3 years, and we have a nice little high-grade resource there of about 1 million pounds at 1.5% copper. We look to hopefully continue building on that and finding other deposits like it. We have a very interesting set of projects in Northern Idaho, again in a very prolific former producing area. The one we're most excited about is the Bonanza project. It's a drill-ready project right beside a property that's being put into production by another mining company called Jervois. It's a very nice drill-ready project. Then we get to South Korea. South Korea is a very nice country in terms of being vertically integrated in the graphite industry. And we're excited to be there and look towards developing these 2 former producing projects in South Korea. But again, it's only after we get producing at Punitaqui. So I think that the key takeaways for us is that we provide exposure to the global marketplace that I think everybody's familiar with. We have catalysts in front of us, which is really looking at developing our projects on a very realistic but aggressive timeline. And then we provide value by getting into cash flowing this year. So hopefully that sparked your interest, and I'd love to talk to you more. Look us up on bmrcorp.com, and glad to speak to you at any time. Thank you.